Welcome back. In the last section, we explored what God, angels, demons, and ancient prophecies reveal about Jesus. Now, let's look at even more fascinating evidence that helps answer one of the most important questions ever asked. Is Jesus truly God? Let's continue the journey. Section 6. Miracles proving divine authority, healings, and more. Jesus didn't do card tricks. He rewrote biology, physics, and death itself. No lab, no tools, just a word or touch. Modern medicine, still trying to catch up. The Gospels don't list every miracle. John straight up says if they wrote them all, the whole world couldn't hold the books. John 21:25. These are the standouts that prove he had authority only God has. Healings and exorcisms. Healing royal official's son, remote from afar. John 4:46-54. Driving out unclean spirit in the synagogue. Mark 1:23-28. Luke 4:33-37. Healing Peter's mother-in-law of fever, mentioned in Matthew 8:14-15. Mark 1:29-31, in Luke 4:38-39. Healing many sick and demon-possessed at evening, Matthew 8:16-17, Mark 1:32-34, in Luke 4:40-41. Healing a leper, Matthew 8:1-4, Mark 1:40-45, in Luke 5:12-14. Healing a centurion's paralyzed servant, Matthew 8:5-13, and Luke 7:1-10. Healing the paralytic who was let down through the roof, and forgetting sins, Matthew 9:1-8, Mark 2:1-12, and Luke 5:17-26. Healing a woman with 12 years of bleeding, Matthew 9:20-22, Mark 5:25-34, and Luke 8:42-48. Healing a man born blind with spit and mud, John 9:1-12. Healing deaf and mute man, Mark 7:31-37. Healing blind Bartimaeus, Matthew 20:29-34, Mark 10:46-52, and Luke 18:35-43. Healing 10 lepers, in Luke 17:11-19. Healing a man with withered hand on Sabbath, in Matthew 12:9-14, Mark 3:1-6, and Luke 6:6-11. Healing crippled woman bent over 18 years, in Luke 13:10-17. Raising widow's son in Nain, in Luke 7:11-17. Raising Jairus' daughter, mentioned in Matthew 9:18-26, Mark 5:21-43, and Luke 8:40-56. Raising Lazarus after 4 days dead, in John 11:1-45. Why this screams supernatural? Picture this. Leprosy vanishes with a touch. A woman bleeding for 12 years is healed just by brushing his cloak. A man blind from birth opens his eyes for the first time after Jesus mixes spit in mud like it's no big deal. In death, Jesus walks up to 3 different funerals and says, "Get up," and they do. No medicine, no machines, just his voice, his hand, his power. Diseases bow, blindness flees, the grave gives back what it took. If that's not God walking among us, who is this Dr. Strange? Modern medicine studies and strives. Jesus simply commands, and it is done. That is the mark of God among us. And those healings are just the start. Let's see his authority over everything else. Section 7. Authority over sin, nature, life, death. When we talk about science, numbers, matter, physics, etc., etc., Jesus says, "Hold my sandals." In John 2:1-11, Jesus turns water into wine. This is the first miracle. He turns water into top-shelf vintage at a wedding, revealing his glory. In Mark 2:5-7, he is forgiving sins, which only God can. In Mark 4:39, he is calming the storm, as if he is talking to a pet. In Matthew 14:25, he walks on water like it's no big deal. In Luke 5:1 through 11, we see the first miraculous catch of fish. A massive haul fills two boats, and nets begin to break. Now, this is one of my favorites, feeding 5,000 with just 5 loaves and 2 fish in Matthew 14:19 to 21. Also, feeding 4,000 with 7 loaves and fish in Matthew 15:38 to 39. Next, a coin appears in the fish's mouth for temple tax as he orders in Matthew 17:24 to 27. A fig tree is withered off its roots, mentioned in Matthew 21:19. In John 21:1 through 11, we see the second miraculous catch of fish, with 153 large fish, and net doesn't tear. It is a post-resurrection provision. What are we witnessing, guys? It's like logic has gone for a vacation. The universe obeys its creator. We are bound by the laws of the universe, but for Jesus, he just simply commands them, and they listen, because he is the King of the universe. Now, let's look at Section 8, the resurrection, appearances, and ascension. The ultimate mic drop: no body, no grave, just victory. In Matthew 28:1 through 4, Mark 16:1 through 5, Luke 24:1 through 3, John 20:1 through 9, we see that women arrive at dawn, find the stone rolled away and the tomb empty. In Matthew 28:5 through 10, Mark 16:6 through 8, Luke 24:4 through 12, John 20:10 through 18, angels declare, "He is not here, he has risen." Women then report to the disciples. In John 20:11 through 18, Jesus' appearance to Mary Magdalene. In Matthew 28:9 through 10, Jesus meets the other women on the way. They clasp his feet and worship him. In Luke 24:13 through 35, Jesus appears to 2 disciples en route to Emmaus. In Luke 24:36 through 43, John 20:19 through 23, Jesus appears to disciples without Thomas. He enters locked room and says, "Peace be with you," shows his hands and side, eats broiled fish to prove he's not a ghost. In John 20:24 through 29, Jesus appears to Thomas and disciples and touches his wounds and declares, "My Lord and my God." In John 21:1 through 14, Jesus appears on shore to his disciples, guides miraculous catch, and eats breakfast with them. In Matthew 28:16 through 20, Jesus appears to the 11 on a mountain, gives final command to make disciples of all nations. In Acts 9:1 through 19, Acts 22:6 through 21, Acts 26:12 through 18, 1 Corinthians 15:8, Jesus' appearance to Paul on road to Damascus is mentioned. In 1 Corinthians 15:6, Jesus' appearance to over 500 at once is mentioned. In Acts 1:9 through 11, Luke 24:50 through 53, we see the Ascension. Jesus leads disciples out near Bethany, blesses them, rises into heaven before their eyes, and angels promise return. What is this that we are witnessing? A ghost or a god? Supernatural, right? Jesus appears repeatedly over 40 days, not as a spirit or vision, but in a real touchable body. He walks, talks, eats fish, lets doubters touch his scars, enters locked rooms, and teaches scripture. Dead people stay dead unless they're God. This isn't legend or hallucination. its history changed forever. The disciples go from terrified hiders to bold proclaimers, willing to die for what they saw. The risen Jesus proves he is who he claimed, God with us, conqueror of death. Now, let's move to section 9, acceptance of worship. Only God deserves it. Angels say no thanks to worship, but what about Jesus? He accepts it every time. In Matthew 2:11, wise men enter the house, fall down and worship the child with Mary his mother. In Matthew 8:2, a leper worships Jesus. In Matthew 9:18, a synagogue leader kneels and worships Jesus. In Matthew 15:25, a Gentile woman kneels and worships Jesus. In Matthew 14:33, the disciples in the boat worship him. In Matthew 28:9, the women after resurrection worshipped him. In Matthew 28:17, the disciples on the mountain worship him. In John 20:28, Thomas says, "My Lord and my God," direct declaration and implied worship. In Luke 24:52, the disciples worship him and return to Jerusalem with great joy. Why this is important to note. In Jewish belief, worship belongs to God alone. Angels refuse it. Good men redirect it. Yet Jesus never says stop or worship the Father only. He accepts it from kings at his birth, desperate people in need, awestruck disciples after miracles, women at the tomb, and even doubters on the mountain. This is no small thing. To accept worship without correction is either blasphemy or the truth of who he is. Jesus quietly receives what only God deserves because he is God. So, my friends, ask yourself, is Jesus a prophet, teacher, or God in the flesh? The Bible piles on evidence from heaven, demons, prophecies, miracles, and his own words. If this doesn't convince you, what would? Drop a comment. Which piece hit hardest? Like, subscribe, share. Let's get this truth out. Jesus isn't asking for likes. He's asking for your heart. See you in the next part.